Right. In that case, I will hand you over to Mr. Phil Reaney.
Thank you very much, Ricky, and thank you for inviting me. This presentation was first put forward at the Scotch Corner Convention nearly 3 years ago. So some of the facts will be slightly out of date now, but if anything, I would think the figures will be worse, not better. But this was meant as a constructive way to try and take the hobby into the 21st century. Oh, where are we going?
Okay.
I think, is that it? We're on the next one, aren't
Yep.
we now? Yeah. So because of the amount of ideas and topics I have, coupled with the response of members from the Exhibition Budgerigar Forum website on many topics, I have decided to compile a series of this topic, each being on specific aspects of the hobby. I must stress at the outset that in no way is this intended to be a criticism of the work our officials have given up their own time for, merely a gathering of information and views on which directions the membership feel the hobby may be improved in the future. So the first topic, shows and showing, aimed mainly at the Open Championship shows, but some ideas on local shows also. First question, are there too many open shows? Currently, there are 18 bronze, 45 silver, 13 gold, 10 area shows, 10 specialist and rare variety shows, including the BS one, 1 national, 1 BS world show, which makes a total of 98 shows, plus, that's the CC ones, plus 23 rosette shows. Then on the right of the screen, you can see how these break down through the year. April, we have 1 championship show. May, we have 1 championship show and 2 rosette shows. June, we have 4 championship shows and 2 rosette shows. July, 27 plus 1 rosette show. August, 28 plus 1 rosette show. September, 18 plus 1 rosette show. October, 14 championship shows plus 1 rosette show. And November, 5 championship shows and 9 rosette shows. So that's the summary of what we've got. It can be seen that the 2 busiest months are July and August. Now, really, this is the peak holiday time when people go away. And most people these days holiday for 2 weeks. So they won't show the weekend they go away. There's the 2 weeks they're away, and the weekend after they return, they won't show. So by keeping the show season in that area, we're losing possible exhibitors for 4 weeks out of that period. So in the 2 busiest months, that means there are 6 or 7 shows in the UK per weekend. So that means that they're competing for entries against each other. And also we need 30 plus judges to judge those shows. And of course, if there weren't so many judges tied up, they would also be free to show and boost the numbers. Is it coming through all right, this, everybody? Yeah?
Yep, loud and clear.
Are there too many open? Yeah, great. Obviously, breeder classes are much lower than any age classes. At early shows, especially, if you look at all the catalogues, you can analyse same as I did. Many shows make a loss, weakening the host society funds. So if 98 shows made a loss of £250, it would be 24,500 money that has to be found from donations or society funds every year. So it's very much like a colander. That money that could be in the hobby doing better things is just leaking away. So one of the ideas I had was to make the area show in each area rotational around existing shows. So what that tends to do is that if people are chasing the CC aspect, which an area show has, they will follow that area show around the other shows held in the area year on year. So, of course, once they've visited a local show that's become the area show for a year, they can decide on the access, the venue, the ease of accessibility to get there. In Sheffield, Meadowhall's not far away. Oh, I can take the wife and family and drop them off at Meadowhall. So hopefully, once a local show has hosted the area show, some will continue to show the year after because they like the venue. The biggest cost for a lot of local societies is nest feather and young stock shows. They have to hire a hall, they have to hire a judge, at least one judge, to do this. Now, of course, if a number of local societies got together and shared a venue, say there were 3 or 4 societies, that cuts the cost of the judge and hall hire, etc., by 3 or even 4. You can still nominate, you know, of the 4 clubs that get together, you nominate for your specials for which club you're a member of. So that would share costs and perhaps encourage exhibitors to try different shows. But putting the area show around the other existing shows reduces the show total by 10 straight away. There's cost saving for individual clubs. And of course, there's no BS rule that says by clubs amalgamating, if they bench 150 nest feather birds, CCs could be available. So your bird's got a CC before it even molts out. So it makes it well on the way to becoming a champion bird much sooner. Okay.
Right, Phil. So Alan Newsham, who is watching on Facebook, says, "Hi Phil, if you could change one thing in the hobby, what would it be?"
That's a good one, that. I would like to see more openness in the hobby for a start, and really more encouragement for novices and juniors, a more structured approach to encouraging and helping these people because they're the future.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just remember, guys, any questions, stick them in the comments and I'll ask them to Phil for you. Thanks, Phil. Carry on.
Yeah. All right, so then we'll look at exhibitor numbers. I analysed the Yorkshire area in 2017, which there were seven shows within the area, and the average number of exhibitors was 31. Now, years ago, it used to be 40, 50, or even 60. And of those exhibitors, 3 of them showed at all 7 shows, 5 of them showed at 6 of them, 3 showed at 5, 11 showed at 4, 11 showed at 3, 23 showed at 2, and 44 exhibitors showed at 1. The average catalogue entries per exhibitor was 13. Free entry fees tended to increase catalogue entries, but the benched entry did not increase by the same amount. If it's free, people put loads in, and then if they've had a skinful the night before or overlaid, they don't bother because it's not cost them anything. So how can we encourage the local exhibitors to support more shows? Could it be area representatives giving talks at local clubs on the point system to win trophies, more prizes for area trophies, leaflet handouts on contacts for shows, dates and shared transportation? E.g., if we can get half the one show exhibitors to show at one other show using the average 13 entries per exhibitor, that would bring another 280 entries into the area from existing exhibitors. half the two-show exhibitors the same would bring 143 entries extra, and so on. And if we could achieve that through the levels opposite, that would increase entries in the area by 618 or 88 entries per show average. Is this something that the local exhibitor can do by encouraging or offering to take birds for some of these one show supporters or two show supporters?
Right,
Okay.
so we've had a question from Sam Wilds. He's watching on Facebook, and he says,
Hi up, Sam. Yeah.
where do you see the hobby in the next 5 years?
I think, the hurdle we've got, of course, is the COVID, but, the progression group, I'm all for progression, and I'd like to think that in my presidential year, we bring the hobby into the 21st century. If we have a better organised everything, and perhaps more breeder involvement, more people who keep birds involved on the exhibition side of the hobby, it can only cause an upward curve, not a downward curve, which is what we've got at the moment. So, I think the progression group could be a catalyst to give the hobby a good shake-up for the better.
Okay, that's great. And just quickly, I've got my own question, if you don't mind, on this.
So,
On your last point, and that's I think the clue to a lot of this is in the name of show. I think a lot of people, a lot of shows are not putting on anything more than the bare minimum. And then when you look at clubs like Gwynedd, that I think they got sort of about 900 birds benched, and they went all out this year. There'd been a silver show for a long time, and they had sort of entertainment. They had an ice cream van down there. They did all sorts of things, and they advertised it. And when sort of people go that extra mile and put stuff on like that, and they've got seminars, um, PowerPoint presentations, etc., then there's something else to do. Do you think that is an important draw to actually get people there?
definitely. At Sheffield, we started having a talk while the judging was going on, because a lot of exhibitors bring the birds in the morning and stay. Of course, you can only give so many of them steward jobs, but also the talkers can also be a pull for people to attend that show. Yeah, there's a lot needs doing. A lot of it is governed by finance, and it's great that a number of these clubs have got a handful of really keen members that are driving it forward. But of course, sometimes it can be a straw that breaks the camel's back when somebody upsets these people when they've given it their all. The main thing is that we should all have empathy with what the show committee are trying to achieve, and do our best to support it.
Okay, that's brilliant. We've also got a question from Philip McHow. He's watching on Facebook. He says, how important is the social side of the hobby to you? And do you think members have felt the loss during COVID?
Yes, the social side is very important. Phil is in the group that we normally go to Germany every year to visit one or two breeders. So, hi, Phil. It is very important. This is your relaxation and pleasure time, really. People go fishing, people have golf, we have budgies. And it's very important. And this is where we're losing it at the moment. But of course, these internet meetings are at least keeping people in contact with one another. But I don't think they're an exact replacement for face-to-face meetings or visits. But certainly in the situation we're in, they've been a lifesaver.
Okay, that's brilliant.
All right. Yeah. So we'll move to the next slide. Showing boat birds. Currently, the choice is left to the individual, and it is the true meaning of open show. You're taking on all comers. Now, some say, oh, the money men buy the bird that does the winning. But of course, if you made it breeder only classes, any age and young bird, all that guy's got to do is offer a silly price to buy the bird that's beating him, get off the show bench altogether, where none of us will then see the bird unless we visit that person. And the thing about it as well is that when someone buys the bird, that puts money in the hands of a breeder and aids cash flow. The breeder-only young bird classes keep the esteem and respect for the individual. I do think some of this is the have and have not jealousy syndrome. But when you're showing both birds, both the breeder and owner benefit. The breeder gets the income to buy his outcrossers, plus increased exposure as being a successful breeder, and the owner gets a modest recognition. So my opinion is I would prefer to keep the status quo of having the option to show both birds in the any age, and breeder birds are the only birds shown by the breeder. I think it does help the cash flow within the hobby.
Okay, we've got another question from Alan Newsham, and he says, "Hi Phil, there's a lot of people breeding budgerigars who are not in the BS and don't show. How can we bring them into the hobby?"
Well, I think this is where, you know, we're making use of Matt Ackers to a certain degree at the moment as the advertising person. We can all do our bit. In Sheffield, we printed posters out and asked various pet shops the meeting venue and dates or contact numbers in their pet shops, which is one idea. I have other ideas about advertising the hobby, which will come out as we go along this presentation. I've had this idea, which Matt Ackers is working on at the moment, where mental health issues seem to be a big thing at the moment with this COVID lockdown. And this is where in years gone by, budgies were a good help for people that were locked in a 16th floor flat and saw nobody day on day. I still have pensioners that will phone me up and say, "You want to see what little Bobby's done today?" It's an excuse for them to phone somebody up and talk to them, and also it's an event in their life. So I feel that after the bad press of bird flu and health and safety issues at the time, I think now we should start trying to promote that a pet bird can be a very good aid for someone with mental health issues or locked in an apartment. So, and of course, it doesn't want to be in cage birds or the budgerigar. It wants to be in the national press to reach out to people. And if we could get people that are in the mental health system to pick up on this, I spoke to Kevin Eatwell as well about perhaps coming up with an accreditation scheme whereby, as members of the BS, we have swabs once or twice a year taken in the aviary and tested for psittacosis, bird flu or whatever. And then if they're clear, you're on a list of accredited breeders so that people who want one for a pet are quite confident that they're getting a bird that's reasonably disease-free. And then also, of course, it would count for us as buying our outcrossers, that if we go to an accredited aviary, we're not bringing a disease back into our own stud. I think there's always a can and can't with these ideas. And I think that, we could use perhaps students to grow the swabs and test them to see. Or in Lincolnshire, we're now fortunate in Lincoln that we have a vet that has quite extensive avian knowledge. And I would like to see the BS have at least one vet in every area that has proper avian knowledge, just not a couple of hours at Liverpool Uni, just briefly touching birds. And of course, the thing is then that in that area, if all the members use that, his knowledge will increase greatly by experience and even by input from, long-serving members that have found various treatments a success. So that's another idea that I'd like to kick off during my presidential year.
Okay, right, so we're getting a few questions coming in now, Phil. So we've got one from Andy Eden, and he says, I saw a recent poll on Facebook asking when people pair up. It was nearly all October/November. Order is driving the breeding season. Do you think that the show should be put back to start in, say, August? This year, my first chick hatched in the middle of May, and I've just had my best season ever breeding in spring and not the middle of winter. What's your thoughts?
I'm totally behind that, Andy. I traditionally used to pair up around February the 14th, Valentine's Day, when the birds were, fit around that time. I could breed as many birds from that date to the end of June than a lot of breeders with the same number of cages that had paired up from September. Nature's with you, light and that is all going the right way. So the cost for heating and lighting are somewhat reduced, and the birds seem to come into cycle much better. I know on the continent, quite a few breeders will pair up in September, but then because the second round over Christmas tends to be diabolical, they split the birds up and then pair them again in February. The big thing about breeding over Christmas is that as a nation, we're very social around Christmas time. And I'm sure there must be many an argument when you as a breeder are going in the aviary for 4 or 5 hours, Christmas Day and Boxing Day, to see to the nests and put rings on, etc., instead of being with the family. So moving the breeding season further forward, not further back, I think would be a far better move. Leave the ring issue date of the 1st of January, but give people, the option to pair up later. And as you've said, Andy, a later showing season would certainly help. So, yeah, I totally agree. I think we should be going the other way, not pulling it earlier and earlier.
Okay, so our next question is from Rob Cartridge, and he says, do you see a benefit of staging a novice open day, maybe at an area or national level? In days gone by, members were made to feel wanted.
Yeah, I mean, these are all ideas, and we said there's a can in can't. With modern technology, these things can be tried for 1 year. And if they're successful, I mean, this idea of area young stock shows, I mean, you could link that and have special awards for novice breeders at that show to try and attract them to show at the show. And of course, we're doing it all being well for 2021, but if it's a success, why not continue it indefinitely till it fails to be a success? So yeah, I'm all for ideas that we can try for 1 year. We don't have to say, right, it's carved in tablets of stone now for the next decade. We can try something and move on from there.
Okay, so our next question is from David Randall, and he says, could the BS spearhead taking the hobby into schools and social clubs? Say, giving talks to encourage new folks into the hobby?
Dave, I'm all for that. I've spoke on this before at various things. I have suggested at Lincoln that we have a story or a drawing competition in schools where the prize could either be a budgie or a computer game, which is judged and presented at our open show. Now, the thing with school children is that if they've won something, usually parents and grandparents want to see them have the prize presented. So that would pull more of the public into the show, another 3 or 4 admission fees and perhaps catalogue entries, but also making them more aware of how good this hobby is. So yeah, I think, school involvement. I've had 2 people do the Duke of Edinburgh's Award looking after my birds. These are young people in youth groups, boys brigade, girls brigade, etc. I'm sure that if we got it at national level, we could get a good syllabus, for that kind of thing, for people to take the Duke of Edinburgh's Award and look, not for them to buy the birds initially, but to look after a champion's birds on a regular basis or whatever, and hopefully that then encourages them to start in the hobby themselves. So yes, I'm all for, one of the things you'll see in a while is what about having a CD and setting up an aviary and having these kind of things in libraries, school libraries and public libraries and universities that are available for people to take out and borrow. So yeah, I'm all for it, Dave. I hope it's all nice in the Hope Valley at the moment.
Okay, so our next question is from Gareth Jones, and he says, "Hi Phil, I've just come into the Budgie Fancy 18 months ago after 13 years exhibiting Fife Canaries. In the Fife Fancy, they only have a handful of specialist shows, and 4 of them having around 1,200 plus, where people travel from various parts of the UK to attend the shows. So the Budgerigar Fancy must have less shows. What's your thoughts?"
Well, that was the start of my slide. Definitely fewer shows. The problem is getting the smaller clubs to amalgamate, because I don't think it'll be as big a problem now, because people had that little bit of power in the club, but now clubs are struggling to get a full committee. I think a period of consolidation, if you're in business, as a lot of the firms are now doing in lockdown, a period of consolidation, I would think, would do the hobby a lot of good, would only help the hobby. There'd be more helpers, etc. So as I see it, you'd perhaps have, at the moment, Sheffield and Doncaster, for instance, share nest feathers and young stock shows. We have 2 nest feathers and 1 young stock show every year. So 1 year, the first nest feather will be in Sheffield. The second nest feather will be in Doncaster, and the young stock show will be in Sheffield. And then the following year, the first nest feather will be in Doncaster, second nest feather Sheffield, and young stock show in Doncaster. And of course, all that happens is that the individual members nominate for Sheffield or nominate for Doncaster, like we do with the specialist and rare varieties. So it's quite easy from one lineup to pick out the points for each individual club. It's a field on a computer. I'm not very computer literate, but it is only a field that needs adding for it to pick out the various things. And I'm sure somebody like Ricky and 1 or 2 others who are quite computer literate, it wouldn't take much to sort out and evolve a program where multiple clubs can show under one roof. It's also good for the hobby. We've mentioned, Phil McHale mentioned about meeting up with people, networking and that. To me, to do this, there are far more pluses than minuses.
Okay, that's all the questions for now, Phil, if you want to carry on.
Okay. Thanks for the questions, by the way. Other ideas for shows. Area shows could hold a judges' meeting in the afternoon where judges and trainees from the area go around selected classes and note their views on the place allocations for discussion later. The idea being to get a consensus of constructive views. It's not pulling the judge to bits. We're just trying to discuss opinions, etc. To get the constructive views over the same birds to assist in arriving at all judges reaching similar opinions in the future. That's got to be good for the hobby, especially if you're a specialist breeder. A lot of judges are not familiar with some of these varieties, and you feel rather annoyed when a key feature of that special variety is overlooked by a judge. Another idea, something we've done at Sheffield, we had a blanket charge per exhibitor. All cage entries, admission in the afternoon, catalogue, cups of tea, raffle tickets, may even a bacon butcher and lunch for one price, £10 or £15 perhaps. Sheffield did it that year. We got more exhibitors and we made a profit. So that's something we're thinking about. An open show normally costs around £1,300 to £1,500 to run. Now, if you've got 20 members paying a £10 sub for the year, that's 200 quid. So obviously there has to be a few benefactors or a number of people putting their hands in the pocket to make the show run. So, other ideas. How do we inform the public, that is potential new members, of our activities and our hobby? This is what you mentioned, Rick. You know, and I'm sure a lot of us could come up with ideas, even a competition at BS level. And, you know, again, a prize or a budget to stimulate people wanting to contribute. I had this idea in the BS have staging for 7,500 exhibits, which of course we're nowhere near use that now. Now, of course, there's a storage problem for that amount of staging, and every club has the same problem with its own staging. Now, if the BS were to donate a tenth of that staging, that's for 750 birds, to each area society, and get a trailer like the YBS do, whereby it's all we do is handball it out of the trailer to put up, handball it back on the trailer, and it sits there till the next show. A lot less messing about than what a lot of clubs have to do. Load it on a lorry, unload it off the lorry, put it up, load it back on the lorry, unload it. It's quite involved, and you know, we don't get much help before and after shows. The YBS show staging can be put up in 3/4 of an hour. So then what would happen is there would be 10 trailers going around the country with BS pictures on the side. You know, this is a BS show, traveling to a BS show, whatever. It's all advertising for the hobby. We're getting exposure on the highway. And we should target agricultural and other small livestock shows. I've been quite a number of times to the Doncaster racecourse to see the rabbit show in January. Now, that is a hobby that has hundreds of juniors. Now, if we were to go back to the racecourse, share the cost, that's one thing. We wouldn't have to foot the whole bill. But no doubt there'd be a number of young people that keep rabbits come looking at the budgies, and hopefully there'll be more coming to want to show and breed budgies than want to show and breed rabbits. That's the other downside. But it is exposing in another livestock area the hobby of bird keeping. Then there's my idea of a DVD on setting up an aviary and initial equipment, and having these copies available at shows, libraries, schools and adult education centres, and perhaps even small livestock agricultural shows. Again, this is perhaps where I think Matt ought to be reaching out with the BS stand, as opposed to going to existing shows, because you're already preaching to the converted to bird keepers anyway. Whereas if you go to an agricultural show or a gymkhana or whatever, you're reaching out to a new clientele. A leaflet explaining virtually nil risk to pensioners. I've mentioned this earlier. Bird flu, psittacosis, especially promoting British bred birds to increase the demand for pets. That is the exhibition surplus, creating a demand for the novice breeders' surplus birds. What killed the hobby quite a lot was the import of birds bred in the East. That were bred indiscriminately and just shipped over by the cartload at probably £1 a piece. If they lost half a consignment, it didn't matter because they were making £20 a piece. But if we can actually sell the health and the docility of exhibition budgies for pensioners and disabled people, I think that would help to create some life for the hobby at the bottom. So then here we are, this BS Pet Health Scheme, which I mentioned earlier. I would like, Kevin, if it became possible in my presidential year, I'd very much like Kevin Eatwell to get involved to see what we can come up with as a pet health scheme. You know, people can go on the BS website and say, I've got a sick budgie, I live in Swansea, where's the nearest avian knowledgeable vet? But also that we can do these swabs to say our aviaries are free of disease. There would be a cost, of course, but I'm sure if it's done by volume, the cost wouldn't be that dramatic.
Okay, so we've had
Okay.
a few more questions come in now, Phil. So we've got a question from Kevin Roger, and he says the biggest selling point the Budgerigar Society has to attract new members is the website and an active social media presence. Many backyard breeders exist and many use social media. Most folk do, irrespective of age. The BS should be much more than about showing. Our website is weak, so we are missing potential new members. Surely it should be our strength.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And, some of these ideas I've put on here are pointing in that direction. We have to reach out more to the public. And as you say, the website is perhaps the best media possible to do this, besides schools, etc. Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, so and we've got another question from Andy Eden, and he says, in light of recent decisions, it appears that the BS seem to be wanting to make money instead of investing in the hobby. Do you think that that some of the vast amount in the bank account should be used to fund trailers and other things, etc.?
Well, this is what I would try and promote, Andy, when I get in there, on the presidential year. We need to keep, I don't know offhand how much it cost to run the BS Club Show, but let me give you an example. Many years ago, Sheffield were holding their open show in a hall that was about £700 for the weekend. And what happened, it was the fuel strike on the Friday night, and we had to cancel the entire show. The rosettes were paid for, the hall was booked, etc., etc. And at that time, I think it was £1,300. So really, if you run an open show, COVID now could shut a show down the weekend it's going to go on. And of course, a lot of the expenses, we were lucky. The show hall said we'd keep the money till the following year, but potentially with COVID or whatever, the show could be shut down 2 days before it's held when all the expenses have been paid out. So we always need a reserve of at least the cost of an open show at local show level. And likewise with the BS, that there are fixed overheads that we have to have money for, whether we have an income or not. But yeah, I think there should be more entrepreneurial type approach to ideas, and some of that money, the reserve, I feel, shouldn't need to be as high as it is, and some of that could be invested in some of these ideas with the support of the membership.
Okay. And we've got another question from Sam Wilds, and he says, what are your views on the current club show at the Dome in Doncaster? If there are things you would like to see change, what would they be and why?
I think, cost is a big thing. We're restricted, because of the cost of what the racecourse used to be. But we need more stalls, I think. When we go to Germany, I think it's the the Castle Show, it's actually like we have the NEC, they have 3 show halls. One's got budgies and parrots, etc. in, another one's got finches and canaries, and one entire hall is given over to equipment, seeds, gadgets, and gizmos. I think the size of the dome restricts that side of the hobby where people can see new ideas. I think at the moment, Stafford is a better place for that kind of thing, because the main hall, the ground floor, half the ground floor is for that type of approach. So I would like to see more of that, more of the accessories, etc. We used to have private bird stands where a stud could have its own stall, very much like Stafford. I remember Holland's being very prominent in my early years, where the three of them had a really big stall where good quality budgies could be bought at reasonable prices. So, you know, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot there, where we need more chance of stall space as opposed to just exhibition space.
Okay, that's great. And um, Rob Rob Hughes, he just wanted to point out, Phil, that him and Matt have been attending agricultural shows for the last 7 years.
Good. And is there any feedback as to, have we got any members from doing these visits?
If Rob wants to respond when it comes through, I'll let you know. But at the minute, there's nothing on there. No.
Okay. Shall we move on to the next slide?
Yep.
So a set of staging in a trailer per area, shared cost, maintenance of the trailer for local shows, saving individual societies cost and storing. So what happens in Yorkshire, I think there are now 8 or 9 societies that contribute. It's actually stored on a caravan storage site when it's not in use. And £60 per society covers the cost of maintaining the trailer and the rental for the trailer to be parked on a caravan site. So if we have the same trailer design and staging for all, obviously, if we divvied up the BS's own staging, it would all be universal. We may have to add a few more if people said we need staging for 1,000, but basically that idea, that means that all the local clubs within an area don't need their own staging because they can use the trailer staging, which happens in Yorkshire. There's the one set of staging goes round them all. It does mean, of course, that then there's no double shows, there's no shows on the same date in that area, which there shouldn't be anyway these days, because there's a 50-mile radius supposedly to stop any show conflicting with another. And of course, it would mean that it's universal staging for the club show. So again, I think that reduces labour, having to manhandle staging to store it under stages or in cellars or wherever, and the trailer can even be parked on somebody's drive. You know, it doesn't have to go on a caravan park like we do in Yorkshire. But I think it would be a big saving at local level for all clubs to think about this in any area.
Okay.
Right, costs. What about reusable rosettes? How many rosettes are put on display after they've been on display at the show? Could it be that we had removable inserts for the centres for the show date and the show? And what happens? Yes, they put on a surround around the show cage on the day, and then the exhibitors got the option to keep them, or they get 20p per rosette back or something like that. You know, so they can either cash in on them. Most rosettes, when we moved to Lincoln, I threw nearly 3 tea chests of rosettes away. I hand a lot back to the societies I show at, but these are ones that had accumulated over the years. So that would be a massive cost saving for any show, and also for any patronage package from some of the area or specialist societies. Using the BS or an area handbook for classification, and each society then only printing one A4 sheet with the venue, the date, the judges and the prizes, and any additional classes above mandatory classification. Think of the amount of paperwork or printed paper that would save if we had, you know, the area, the classification in the area handbook. Sponsorship, which, you know, the clubs down south are doing a marvellous job of. You know, do we network and get ideas off each other to develop this sponsorship? If we had less CCs, that would be less classes, meaning less judges, which they would be available to show themselves. Using the BS area handbook, could this encourage membership of same? even have all show schedules printed in the area handbook for that year. The increase in cost for area recovered through increased affiliation fee, it should still mean a saving overall, and every member has a copy. So there'll be no postage, etc. You know, in Yorkshire, 7 shows, 7 envelopes, or 7 people have to distribute the schedules around. As I mentioned earlier, publicity for schools, drawing budgies or a budgie story competition. Again, a teacher would advise us as to perhaps having 3 or 4 age groups and 3 or 4 prizes, which could either be birds or a computer game. And what you would do, you would present it at the open show, as I said, to draw these winners and the members of their family into the show hall, purchasing admission fee, refreshments, etc., etc.
Okay, right. So,
Special if sorry, yeah.
if I can just ask my own question quickly there, Phil, in regards to the rosettes, we say about having possibly reusable. At my own club, Mid Essex, we unanimously agreed to scrap our rosettes altogether for 2 reasons. One, from a green point of view, because like you say, that people have got bags and boxes of these things, and they're not the easiest thing to recycle, and we need to sort of start taking our environment into account. And secondly, what we decided to do instead of awarding rosettes was award seed vouchers. Um, a face value, I can't remember if it was £1 or £2 now. I think it was £1. But these are things that are valuable and useful to the exhibitor.
Yeah.
Whereas, although a rosette is nice, and they will still get rosettes at our show from the BS or the specialist societies, do they need that extra one from the club too? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, what we did one year, and again, I'm not that clever on a computer, but we actually took photos of the winners and put them on the CC. We made like a copy CC with the photo of the bird on it. Now, you know, again, a bit of printing ink and some glossy paper, 100 weight paper, you could soon photo the bird, and you know, it's not rocket science. I could do it then, so I'm sure a lot of other people could do, whereby we could print the bird. And for the exhibitor, it's very relevant. It's his bird that's on that prize card. And I say it's not big cost and time. So that's one idea. I like the seed idea is a good thing. You know, if you can get donations from some of the accessories, drinkers or iodine nibbles or things like that. What we used to do at local level on the Youngstock and members shows is we had a central table with a box of iodine nibbles, half a dozen drinkers or whatever. And if you were a class winner, you went and picked off that table something that was of use to you. So yeah, I like that idea, Ricky, on the seed voucher, and it could be explored, you know, similar idea using equipment that's of use to breeders and exhibitors.
Okay, that's great. I just
So
wanted to
yeah,
point
I
out
like it.
on that fact that those seed
Yeah.
vouchers are profession. They're the official countrywide seed vouchers. They do have our club logo on, but they could be used at any countrywide agent. So it's not something that's specific to our show. If someone wins and if travelled
Local.
down, they're
Yeah,
useful anywhere they go. So okay, that's great. Right, so we've got a few other
that's right.
questions.
Yeah.
Where was it? Right. Ah, there we go. Right, sorry. Andy Eden, he says, I think there are far too many CCs. Does Phil think that these should be reduced considerably to make them worth something again?
You'll see this in a short while. So yeah, I'll answer that in one or two of my next slides.
Okay, and Rob Hughes has come back to us. He says, Phil, with all due respect, the impact we've had at agricultural shows is higher than most other events. We regularly gain new members, have developed our approach over the years of the promotional team for turning up with a simple stand to note gaining a wider response from the general public by presenting a stand that has an aviary of various budgerigars, including those which can be handled. We have a range of booklets and flyers that discuss the introduction to the hobby for newcomers, that promote British budgerigars, and of course we discuss and promote local breeders and societies.
That's absolutely brilliant. That's, great. So these ideas were brought out, I put forward a few years ago, but that's great and it's working. So that's something that, has been put into practice and it's having a beneficial effect. So well done, Rob and Matt. Smashing.
Okay, and we've got a question from Kevin Eatwell, and he says, Phil, how do you see these measures being implemented? Are the area societies going to step up and coordinate joint resources with their local clubs?
I think this is what we've got to drive forward, Kevin, is that here we are, it looks like being, I'm feeling quite proud that if it's going to be in my presidential year, that a lot of these ideas are put into effect and we take the hobby forward. It's great that people have had a voice through the internet. I respect anybody who's constructive. I disrespect people who are destructive. In work, I always say to my staff, don't come to me with a problem without you've got a solution. That means they're coming to me with a positive attitude. I might not use their idea, but it's got them thinking the same way. So one of the reasons I didn't join this group initially was I felt the attack by name was rather unfair on Maurice Roberts. He does a lot of good for charity. His biggest drawback, I think, is that he tries to be friends with everybody, and really sometimes you've got to make a decision and you're going to upset some people. No, so, I'm in it now. I want change. I'm enthusiastic about a lot of the ideas that have been aired on the progression group, and I hope that, all these people that are on there are going to turn up or at least vote for some of these things if they put forward during my presidential year. I will do my best as an individual to see, try and get representation on a lot of these things, as long as they're all positive and not destructive. So yeah, going back to Kevin's statement, question, yeah, I think the area societies are going to have to become a more vital part of the hobby as the lesser clubs disappear through cost or lack of support. We're going to need focal points within any area. So I do think that from the top, a slant should be more on these area shows, making them more attractive in whatever ways we can. Sponsorship, prizes for individual clubs, etc. I'm sure if we got the basic idea forward, a lot of constructive ideas what could be done would be made evident.
Okay. And
okay,
we've got a question from Kevin Roger.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm an active member of 2 clubs, but I'm not a member or see the benefit of being a member of the area society, and I have no affiliation to other societies such as Labs. It's too expensive to pay for all of these subs and ring orders, all at the same time of year. When will I be able to pay by direct debit monthly? I believe we are in the year 2020 outside of this hobby. Harsh but fair comment. What's your thoughts on that, Phil?
Well, it's a good idea, certainly. What shall I say? Even if it was run centrally, that subs were collected by the BS for labs, etc., and then distributed out, it would mean that we could register for a ticket machine, a card reader, and all this carry on. I mean, obviously now you can order rings on the net and what have you. But yeah, we've got to look at costs, but then conversely, you get people moaning, again, this will come on in later. Can I answer the rest of that question a little bit further on? Do you mind? Because the reason for it will be evident later on.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
All right.
Yeah. So we've got another question here from Sam Wilds, and he says, what would your views be on the BS running a show for budgerigars of colour and allowing people from all over the world exhibiting? Because abroad they are very, very popular. Could this be another way to get more members?
I'm sure it could, Sam. And on the slide that's up now, specialist and rare shows, I was thinking putting the miniatures in the specialist and rare show with a much larger classification. But yeah, let's try a separate show. Again, we've got that cash reserve. We can air it 1 year, look at the support, and then decide whether it needs to be an annual event. So good idea. They're all budgie breeders, it gives us all an insight. I would like to see, for instance, if we did that BS judges could apply for a training course on that day where we can walk around all the classes and discuss with some of these experts the finer points of the miniatures. We'll look at the exhibition budget that the judge judges now, and roughly a budgie is 2/3 head and body, 1/3 tail. If it was like the miniature, 50% head and body and 50% tail, it would be thrown out as a long fly. So you're asking a judge to judge one way with one type of budgie and another way with another type. So I think some training for existing judges on the miniatures would be a good step forward, and a show solely on those would be the right venue to do that.
Okay, that's great. We've got another question from John Moore, and he says, I'm all for the idea of judging the whole colour variety as one class. My question to you as a judge is, can the birds all be judged on the staging? Can they be all judged on the staging? With just the spot winners being moved to judge the major award? Because the most time consuming process at the shows and tiring over the day is the constant moving of birds from staging to judge to holding area back to judge and finally all back onto the staging.
Can I answer that later? Again, Rick, I think you know that there is an issue about that.
Yeah, of course.
On my classification.
Yep.
So I've not forgot the question. It'll be evident further on in the presentation.
Okay, we'll come back to you on that one, John. So
okay.
Then we've got a question from Stephen Hartford, and he says, will the area shows not detract from the local shows, therefore having a detrimental effect? So surely the effort should be put into local club shows, not the area shows, grassroots.
No, if you looked at what we said earlier, is we're doing away with the area show on its own. One show in the area will be designated the area show for that year, and then it will rotate round. So we're actually doing away, or the suggestion is to do away with 10 area shows, but putting the double CC aspect of an area show onto each individual championship show in that area in rotation.
Oh, I see. So in my area, for example, London and Southern, the Mid Essex show would get a turn at being the area show. Then it would roll round to
Hastings,
Southern Classic, yeah, etc., etc. Okay,
yeah.
Right.
So we're doing away with 10 shows, which is reducing, 10% of the shows straight away, but also letting each area, each individual show, local show, have its year of glory, where it gets patronised with a double CC, and hopefully pulling in more exhibitors, who some of them, after that initial attraction of the area show, will perhaps show in years to follow.
Okay, right. So we've got another question from Darren Snell, And he said,
Help, Darren.
firstly, he wants to say it's a really great talk. And he says area shows, I think, are the ways going forward, and make them
Yeah,
shows to want to be at socially,
yeah,
and numbers of birds benched.
that's right. I mean, when you go on the continent, the large shows actually have a dinner on the Saturday night. You know, should we go back for area shows being a weekend show where it's a very special event? Is this a way of developing it? I'm only asking the question. I'm not saying it should. You know, obviously people can put their views forward, but the area show, just instead of just being a one-day show, should it be made a weekend event like the BS Club show?
Okay, and then we've got another question from Gareth Jones. He says, "Hi Phil, do you think there should
I,
be a maximum size to the BS ideal? At the moment, some birds are getting bigger and bigger. Where do we stop?"
it is one area I do feel strongly about, is that most areas of small livestock have a maximum and minimum size. At the moment, we have no maximum. The standard was changed from the ideal budgie should be 8.5 inches long many years ago, where you could have a bird too big or too small, to suddenly changing, and I can never remember a vote being held on this, that the ideal budgie is at least 8.5 inches. Now, of course, we got our fingers burnt with that, because then suddenly we were getting bigger birds, and with the short perch in the show cage, the birds were crouching at the back of the show cage. So the knee-jerk reaction to accommodate these birds was to extend the perch to the front of the show cage, whereas the big bird can come to the front and lift its head up. I think, yeah, I'm all for having a maximum size. I'm not saying 8.5, I'm not saying 9 inch. It would need to be deliberated. But of course, one of a breeder's skills is getting all the features we want into the right size. So, you know, there is a skill in getting the quality into that size, which is done on all of the forms of livestock. And the other danger we have, of course, is that the cage we have at the moment was designed around an 8.5 inch bird. And if we get too big, we're going to have problem with animal rights people saying we've got to scrap the whole lot and start buying new show cages that are bigger. So if, you know, that would cripple the hobby. A lot of people would not bother buying new show cages. So we have to make the ideal size of the budgie to suit the existing show cage. The only other solution we've got now really is to take away the sloping roof and have just a box, if you like, whereby a bigger bird could stand more comfortable in it. I have got developing a prototype of a perch in a show cage with no sloping roof, like a disc or a series of discs that the right diameter through the center of gravity of the budgie. And then what happens, the perch can be, on a wing nut, can be moved up and down in a quite a larger hole, so that the bird is the center of the bird is through the center of the circle. Thereby we have an accurate measurement that could be at a show. You could just pop the bird in, bang, you can see top and bottom the length of the bird. But yeah, I'm all for having a maximum size, and I'll give you the reasons why.
Okay, and we're another question from Alan Newsham, and he says, "Hi Phil, you have judged around the world under many different societies' rules. Is there something that we can bring in from abroad that will help us to achieve better shows in this country?"
There are plenty of things. South Africa is very forward thinking. There are ideas in America with the top 10 idea that they have over there. I'll not go into the detail now. But certainly, you know, and perhaps this was really the original purpose of the WBO, to share views and thoughts from all around the world and come out with a good standard type society or hobby. I mean, some of the colour standards. are far better, I feel, than what we have for some of the varieties. Clearwings, for instance, I have done a presentation purely on clearwings, which will be in the Budrigar in the very near future. And I understand that the Clearwing Society were considering handing it out as a Bible to all their members. When I first went, the first variety I ever had were Clearwings. And Clearwings, if you look at the standard, should have blue-grey feet, a blue tail, and a violet cheek patch, and the violet as deep as a normal budrigar. Now, the birds I feel we've got on the bench at the moment are virtually all full body coloured grey wings. You have a mid-violet cheek patch, which is midway between grey wing and clear wing. In 1991, at a judges' meeting, I brought up that suddenly normal birds, which should have blue-grey feet, were appearing with pink feet. Now, I got shot down at the time. Oh, it's only a minor thing in a normal light green. But when you've got cinnamon clearwings and it's in a show hall with sodium lighting, and the clearwing is an adult, cinnamon clearwings, like cinnamon spangles, the markings tend to fade. So one of the indicators for a judge in poor light of it being a cinnamon clearwing was A, the brown shaft of the tail, and B, pink feet. But now I defy any of you to go in your aviaries and not find at least a third of your normals having pink or pinky blue feet instead of blue-grey. It's a minor fault in a normal bird, but in the specialist varieties, it's a key identification feature. So again, a lot of these standards from around the world need to be looked at and seen if we can review and update ours to have a common interest in whatever variety it is. As birds travel around the world these days, you know, we purchase birds from all around the world. It's more important that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet for each variety, or we're going to finish up with a lot of mongrels.
Phil, you say this is why the WBO was set up to sort of bring us all together. So, do you feel it's not working at the WBO?
I don't think it reaches out to the membership enough, Ricky. I think the idea was good, but I don't think it's structured right somehow. I will perhaps know more if I get involved in the next coming year as to any views and opinions. But because I'm not directly involved, I don't want to criticise the work that those people do. We've got to remember a lot of it's all voluntary, and they give up a lot of the time and travel all over. So I'd need to look more into its aims and etc. before I would pass an opinion. But I do feel it could be improved.
Okay, thank you. Right, that that's all the questions on there for now, Phil. If you want to carry on.
Okie dokie. So the next topic was specialist and rare shows. I feel they have an important role in promoting the aim for adherence to the ideal. Each specialist society could have awards for variety content. And one of the ideas for variety content, roughly the base scale of points is 60 for the budget and 40 for the variety. But these specialist and rare shows, could we reverse the points? So there's 60 points for the variety and 40 for the budget. This is just a question, you see. For example, Latinos and Clearwings. Now, as I've mentioned, Clearwings, the three key features which are virtually lost on the current Clearwings in inverted commas, unlike Latinos. If you look at the old Cult of the Budrigar books, etc., the Lutino had pure white tail and flights. Now, we lost this when somebody, God rest her soul, she's dead now, but Marjorie Kirby Mason was one of the first to put yellow faces into Lutinos with the thought of improving the yellow. But of course, what happens is that you get a yellow wash through the flights and tail. But if you look at some of these original pictures, bear in mind this is an ideal. It's not a standard, it's an ideal. And this is where, again, I feel we've lost There should be a standard budget, that's for shape, size, shape, deportment, etc. But for all varieties, it should be an ideal. And what we as breeders of birds are doing is showing our best attempt at that ideal at someone else's best attempt. Now, for instance, you get novices looking in the standards of the thing, and an opaline should have a clear mantle. And there was somebody in Sheffield that we said, well, why aren't you showing? I've got nothing good enough to show. So I went to have a look, and he got a very good opaline as a budgie. But it had got a dirty back. Not very bad, but a dirty back. Well, why aren't you showing that? Well, it's got a dirty back and the standard calls for a clear. I said, no, you're showing your best attempt at that ideal. And what we've lost is people now think that the standard is what we show, the standard. No, we're showing our attempt at an ideal of that variety. Do you get me? Do you get that, Rick? Yeah.
Yeah. No. That, yeah.
I'm looking at you because I got.
Sorry. Yeah. No. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have to do this with novices, especially and juniors. We've got to say, look, you're not looking for the perfect budgie to show. You're saying this is my best attempt at a Texas clear body. It's got smoky flights, which it should have, but they're quite dark. But then my Texas clear body's got better spots or whatever, or better condition than yours. So this is where the judge then compares the nearest to the ideal in his mind. And this is where we have a written ideal, and this is where individual judges place emphasis on different features of the bird. And of course, one of the best people that I can remember that used gamesmanship was a chap called Steve Robertson. And he used to steward for a judge, and he'd decide whether he liked double factor spangles against single factor, whether he was keen on condition, whether he preferred blues to greens. And he had this in a little black book. So I was known, or used to be known, to give hens a lot of advantage. I appreciate a good hen. So Steve would perhaps have in his notebook, Phil Reaney likes a good hen. So when he next shows under me, he'll make sure he's got a strong team of hens. You follow me? That's gamesmanship. It's not cheating. You're just looking at how each individual judge interprets the written standard. But as I say, I think we ought to change the word standard, keep the word standard for the size, shape, deportment, etc. But then for the varieties, it should be the ideal. And then, as I say, what we as exhibitors are doing are showing our best attempts at that ideal. Right, judge, this came up earlier. Judge the whole variety as one class and select the section specials, etc. from the lineup. Again, this can be done quite easily, and a computer can pick the highest placed novice in that lineup, or the highest placed intermediate, or the highest placed intermediate opposite sex. It's an office procedure once the judge has graded the birds right down. The beauty is, as well as I've just said, is that they grade from best to worst, so the exhibitor can see in that variety where his stock stands, as opposed to it being piecemeal like it is now. As was mentioned, less handling of birds. It can actually be done on the staging where the class is. It enables the judge to get his eye in. At the moment, we finish up, we start off, there's one in the class, it's a tail missing, it's a spot missing, it's a flight missing, it's the only one in the class, it gets the first. So then when we get to the CC lineup, we've got a mismatch of birds that are either incomplete or out of condition. If we grade them right through, all these aspects can be taken into account to grade the birds right down from 1 to whatever. So this would help the judge's training scheme. They'd be able to look at the whole variety all the way through. As was mentioned earlier, it's time saving, and it's an actual grading of all the birds in that variety from top to bottom. At these specialist and rare shows, should we not have black museum classes? birds with variety faults or photos of birds with faults, then a list after the seminar of judges who have attended that seminar. In other words, you're making these judges more acquainted with specialist aspects of that variety. And then, of course, when people are booking judges for their shows, oh, Ricky Anderson has attended the Labs Specialist and Rare Variety Show and is now more familiar with that variety if it's one he didn't breed. And then, should we be actively promoting a cleanup of the varieties? I've mentioned Clearwings. You know, we've lost the complete adherence to the ideal. There's virtually nothing on the show bench that's a Clearwing. And of course, because a lot of judges aren't familiar with them, there's a chap called Phil White who had a budgie, I think he called it Chameleon, that is a champion bird as a dilute, as a grey wing, and as a Clearwing, the same bird. So that casts, you know, aspersions on the judging ability of some of the people that judge that bird. Then should miniatures be classified and shown here? Well, that touches on what Sam Miles brought up, that, you know, even a completely separate show may be an idea. Or would the first step do it to be done under the Specialist and Rare show? And if it was just such a good success and the entries were big enough, then branch it off as a separate show. But try it combined for a start. All right, any questions?
Only from me on this one, Phil. So,
Yeah.
And we've spoke about this before, but just for the sort of benefit of everyone else watching. So, as you know, I specialise in the rares, and although in all the open shows I agree there's too many CCs, I don't like the fact that in the rare show they still put all the 5 rare varieties under the 1 rare CC, and it's difficult for the specialist breeders. I can't put out my best anthracite and my best slate because they're competing against each other. It's a waste of time, and I'd like to see separate CCs for all of the rare varieties at the rare shows. What's your thoughts on that?
I think at the rare shows, this is what I'm saying, they could expand the mandatory classification for all these rarer, you know, rare varieties. And what I'd like to see, at least at normal championship shows, that sex-linked and dominant rare varieties are in one class and your recessive varieties are in another. Because obviously sex-linked and dominant, you can improve in one generation. With a recessive variety, to improve it, you need at least 2 generations, because you have 1 year to breed splits and then the following year to fetch them out. So I think it's a disadvantage when you've got sex-linked or dominant rare varieties showing against the recessive ones. So I would like to see step 1, that the rares were split into 2 that way, but then in the specialist and rare shows, yeah, let's cater for all these individual breeds. I mean, one of the things they can do, which will come in my classification slide shortly, well, I'll leave that bit, Mickey, if you don't mind, and I'll bring it up when we get to the classification one.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Okay. We've had that one, haven't we? Sorry. Should we have our own ring making equipment? I think it would have been a good idea. I suggested this over 2 decades, 2 decades ago. It would utilise our office space at Spring Gardens. I'm sure there'd be a lottery grant or other grant available to develop it. It would only need a retired operator with computer skills to key them in on a laptop. And of course, we could also sell rings to other small livestock hobbies that use rings, pigeons, other cage birds and rabbit breeders. Of course, as I said on the right here, grants are available. That's not Grant Finlay is available. He's retiring, God bless him. It would be an income for the society. We would have more control of the ring issue, but the cost of it, could the money be better spent elsewhere, e.g. the trailer idea? When I first brought this up, I think the ring making machine used by Sigma Two Stringer, I think he told me that he could do one for under £4,000. I think the current machines cost about £68,000. So, you know, the cost has really shot up. But of course, we think perhaps the ring issue now has been resolved for the time being. The avian idea have come up trumps with a much better machine, which is credit due to them laying the money out to do that. So I think we have to run with it now, perhaps for a year or two, and see, you know, what transpires. All right.
Okay, we just had a question come in quickly, Phil, from Adrian Loveck, and he said,
Yeah, good old Eddie.
do you think a change to the judges' training scheme would be an advantage? Perhaps having one held over a weekend instead of waiting 3 years to become a judge?
I think the 3 years gives you experience in so much as you've got you're one-to-one with experienced judges. And we, as judges, we don't all agree. So that 3-year apprenticeship really gives the trainee judge a broader scope of opinions and features. And hopefully in every show he assists in, he'll pick up something. You know, whether it be, no, I don't like that idea, I shan't do that when I'm a judge, or, oh yeah, I can see the benefit of that. One of the things, for instance, if I'm judging a class and there's more than 7 birds, the 8th bird I always hold up at the side of the 7th, so that we've got a proper grading down. Sometimes you'll see judging and you look and you think you've got a 1 to 7 on the top row and a 1 to 7 on the second row. And the number 1 on the second row should have perhaps been number 4 on the first row. You follow me?
Yeah.
So I think the training is good, and in so much as is getting different views from fully qualified judges and helping him to form his own mode operandi of how he's going to do the judging, and what features, you know, hopefully the judges are pointing out. You know, little points and snippets that can't be picked up out of a book. I don't think that a weekend intensive would be a good move. No, that's my own personal opinion. I prefer to see a longer time. In Yorkshire, we do have judges' training schemes which are run over. There used to be a weekend, but with lack of support, it's now only done in 1 day. But I would like to see them come back in each area, where a judges' training scheme weekend or 2 or 3 weekends are done to kick them off initially. And what happens in Yorkshire as well, if you've attended the judges' training scheme, you're allowed to judge nest feather and young stock shows that aren't under the BS patronage. So it's a good airing or a good training ground for them.
Okay.
All right. Next slide.
Yep.
Does veterinary vets contacted in areas and asked to register if they have deeper avian knowledge put on the BS website? This is something I suggested earlier. And as a start, who do DEFRA use in any given area? Would that be the right vet for a start? We could sponsor veterinary students who use specified avian research for their dissertation. This produces more vets with avian knowledge. We will become affiliated to pigeon, poultry and zoological organisations already doing avian research and contribute our 10k, which is what we generate roughly each year as a contribution, to just refine their research for budrigars. Do you get me? As an add-on to what they're doing.
Yeah.
And would a list of breeders prepared to supply basic medical acquired knowledge over the years if contacted by these vets? Can we help these vets to become more acquainted with, you know, treatments that we've used that have been successful?
Hopefully we might hear from Kevin Eatwell and that he was watching earlier. Just quickly, Phil, we've got two questions again back on to the judging point. So the first one was from Mike Simpson, and he says, "Do you think there's any merit in providing a training scheme for chief stewards?"
At Sheffield, we do it. Yeah, there's merit. What happened at Sheffield when I ran Sheffield is any new member was automatically a chief steward at our open show, right? And what happened, of course, is we had an experienced chief steward under him. So it served a number of purposes. In the years I ran it, any member of Sheffield could be a chief steward. He knew the ins and outs. But also, as a beginner, he'd got the more experienced fancier at side of him. It gave him a dialogue. Can I come and see your birds? Or things like that. And he also had to speak to the judge. So as a new member, he was suddenly acquainted with two prominent members in the hobby. And like I say, is that we had all posts in Sheffield. I see the teachers' union saying that the government hadn't got a plan B for getting pupils back to school. Well, in Sheffield, we always had a plan B. There was always at least one other person capable of doing any position in the hobby. So that can be done at local level. But if people suggested it at BS level, so be it type of thing. But that's what we did as a local society in Sheffield.
Okay, well, it's certainly something I would be interested in. So, yeah, thanks for the question, Mike. Andy Eden has said, could you not give the option of a trainee doing the 6 shows in 1 year if he wishes?
Well, that's up for discussion. You know, suck it and see, put a proposition in and see how it's responded. It does mean the guy's got to run about all over, you know, in 1 year for the cost, etc. But I can see no reason why not. You know, if the venues are available within a travelling distance of where he lives. So I can't see anything against that.
Okay, I'm sure Andy will start putting pen to paper. Okay, that's all the questions for now, Phil. If you want to move along to your next slide.
Okay. Local clubs. Ricky, have I missed the classification one? Or is it next?
Yeah, we haven't seen it yet.
No, we haven't, have we? Let me go back and see. I don't know why I've missed it. On this copy, it must be missing. Yeah, we've missed some slides. I've gone back to possible solutions.
Okay, go on, we'll jump back.
It's quite near the front. Have you got back to it?
Yeah, go on. We've got it on the screen if you want to just...
Yeah, all right. So let me just check the one previous to that. Yeah, so let's have a look. Yeah, it's this one, isn't it? We've done that one. Right. So are there too many challenge certificates? This came up on the web, didn't it, recently? There are 28 CCs at bronze and above, creating 560 classes. That's more than the number of entries at most shows. There are 56 CCs for the gold and area shows. And at the BS Club Show, there are 56 colour certificates. 49 had less than 50 catalogue entries. And of those, more than half of them, 29, had less than 25 entries. And 6 of those had less than 10. This is at the club show. And bear in mind, catalogue entries are usually 15 to 20% less than the bench. Catalogue entries are 15 to 20% higher than what's actually benched. And does this not lessen the merit of the CC? Possible solutions. We could bind some colour groups at normal championship shows, but allow the specialist and rare variety shows to expand on a basic mandatory classification. This would mean classes would have competition at the outset instead of judges awarding a first, even though the exhibit has faults, e.g. condition, a spot or flights missing. It also means, and judges will understand what I mean with this, is it means the judge gets his eye quicker, is more honed up at looking at faults, etc., when he's got a range of birds to look at. So judging would flow much easier. Right, so what I did then, this was in 2017, so I would feel, if anything, numbers in brackets will perhaps be slightly less than what's here now. So I took two shows. I took the Trent Valley Gold, and their entries are in black, and the Doncaster, which was a silver show, their entries are in green. So light greens at Trent Valley, there were 34 that year, 21 at Doncaster. Dark greens, there were 13 in Trent Valley and 10 at Doncaster. If we were to turn the classification back to any normal green series, it would mean there'd be 47 greens in the green class at Trent Valley and 31 at Doncaster. Now, 47 to judge right down is not really a problem. The very first show I did at the BS Club show, I believe in 1991, there were 76 champion any age Latino cocks in the one class. So if I could do it then, I'm sure I can do it now. So 50 or around 50, I don't think would be a problem to go right down from top to bottom. So you can look at all them down and see where I've suggested some classes combining. An interesting one is we've got opaline green and opaline blue. Now, opaline cinnamons at the moment are very poorly supported. So why not put any opaline or any normal opaline and combine them in there? That would then again bring the combined class up to around the 50 mark, which, I think is a manageable amount. Now, of course, what you can do is that in that colour group on the right-hand side is that the winner of that colour group, we'll say normal blue, 65, he would get 7 points for his CC. But we'll say the winner of that group is a sky blue. We can then look for the highest placed cobalt. So that's best cobalt in show in effect. And that could get a 1 point CC, which is more than likely all it would receive if it was in a separate class. Or you could say, well, it's 10th in the class, so it's beat 55 birds, so it's a 5 point CC. What we're saying, you don't have to do away with the CC. All we have to do is change the rules that a CC winner has to be a class winner. A CC winner would have to be in a colour group, not a class. All right, and by combining them as I have done, the other interesting one is lacewing, which of course is a cinnamonino. So should we put that in the red eyes? But some may argue albinos and lutinos are selfs, where lacewings have markings. So it's also a sex-linked variety. So do we put clear bodies and lacewings together? And if a clear body wins the colour group, the highest placed lacewing gets the CC for lacewings. And again, that can all be done in the office. It doesn't have to be a judge's job. Judging will be done much quicker. Lunchtime would be 11 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock. And you've got the rest of the day to discuss budgets and look round. So I'd welcome people's views on that. As I say, we're not doing away with the CC. It's just a different mode of judging. And as the chap earlier said, it's less handling of the birds. The birds are settled more. You've got more birds to judge, so you've got a more accurate grading, and it would flow much better.
Andy Eddens pointed out that in the new lower gold show entry, every 9th bird would win a CC with a minimum entry.
Yeah. Poor. It's just a class win. It's a first prize card, isn't it? At the bottom, I actually put that In the existing way, the average CC was 14 entries between all sections at Trent Valley. As I say, that's entries. So we're talking about 3 years ago. So what Andy's saying at 9 will be perhaps quite spot on. And at the Doncaster shows, the average entry was 18, and again, 20% less, 3, 4 off, that's only 14 again. Doing what I've said on the right, or suggested on the right-hand side, is the average CC would be 41 at the gold show, and the average a silver show would be 28. At least the CC is more meaningful, I feel, to that end, and it should, get people trying harder if that's what they're after. Okay. Reduced challenge certificates. Less CCs would mean a reduced classification, and as can be seen from the previous slide, most colour groups would be around 50 entries. If CCs are desired for combined existing classes, the main CC goes to the colour group winner, but the highest place, say Latino or Albino, for example, can be picked out in each section class and then set up for best Latino and Albino, and perhaps awarded a 1-point CC or a CC of the total number of birds in that group that it's beaten. The advantages: less paperwork, fuller classes, less time consuming. Reduced sections. Well, of course, this has now come into being. There are many void classes in the junior section, and most of the others have only 1 entry. Using a similar procedure as in the CC reduction idea, could we not combine novice and junior classes, but have a suffix J on junior entries, then retain the highest placed juniors in each class for a competition lineup for the junior awards? Advantages: time saving, less paperwork, lets juniors face real competition and see how their birds are against the section they will be moving into next. Okay?
Yeah, so on that point, Phil, so that could really be applied to all sections, couldn't it?
Yeah. Well, of course, you wouldn't need the visual suffix on the label, because all that would happen is to be on the entry form, and it would be on a field. It would be a field in the computer. So once the judges judge them, it doesn't need to know any sections at all. It doesn't need an indicator. They'll just be numbered 1 to 50, and he judges them as such. And then the computer knows that the bird that's come third, number 27, number 3, is actually a novice, the highest placed novice.
Does that take less pressure off the judge not knowing what section that bird is from?
Well, he can never have the accusation that he's put that bird up because it's a champion, doesn't it? It means it's an honest assessment of the birds in front of him, which I hope most judges do, but it stops anybody saying that he's put that bird up because it's a champion.
So that we would be safeguarding our judges from allegations.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, we just had a question from Simon Devaney. He says, I know by talking to you at the time how disappointed you was when your presentation was cut short at Scotch Corner. Given how good this presentation has been this evening, it would probably a good job they did, or we would have needed a lock-in. Well done, mate.
Oh, thank you very much, Simon. There is one thing I've thought about, Ricky, to further your internet activities with the Budgie Society. I was going to say you have my permission to reproduce this if people want to purchase a copy to study in depth at a fee that you suggest, £1 or £2 as a donation towards your running costs. I'm quite happy for people to have a copy and a way of raising a bit of money to further your progressive group.
So we've got no running costs, Phil, and people have been quite generous in offering me anything I need in regards to sort of like web space, etc. So if you're fine with it, then I'll reproduce this for anyone that wants it for no cost whatsoever.
Okay, and they're quite free to contact me if it prompts an idea after this event tonight, if they want to discuss something.
That's fantastic. Right, so we just had another question come through from Kevin Roger, and he says, so if you judge all colours together, if I get it right, all ranks together, how do you make sure novice breeders' birds are marked respectively, likely to be lower quality? It needs care. You don't alienate beginners and lose members.
I disagree. When I was a beginner, I was beaten hands down by a millionaire, a chap called Peter Grafton Holt. He was the chairman of Domestos. I was turning up to buy budgies on my two-stroke motorbike, and he was turning up on a Bentley. And what I used to do when at a show, I'd get the judge, can you tell me why this person's birds beat mine? Oh, well, it's a wider head, it's a deeper mask, it's better condition. It's clean the above the nostrils where they get black and dirty. These were all tips I picked up and I applied them. And of course, you can't go out and buy the ideal budgie. You buy a feature and blend that into your existing stud. By the time we got to novice, I was winning the odd class. And by the end of novice, I was winning more than him, and he packed up. So, we want we're not kids. We're not wanting, us handheld and patted on the back. Oh, good boy for showing a budgie. No, we want to see what we've got in the overall quality of the class. There'll be some surprises. There's some juniors got budgies that'll finish up still with the CC. They've got that much quality. But it enables the exhibitor to look and say, please, Mr. Judge, why is my bird only fifth? Why has it beat that one? Well, it's spots, it's condition, yours has got a flight missing, it's got an undershot beak, or whatever. It's in real time, it's seeing what he's actually got. It's no good giving him bullshit and saying, oh, you have super birds when he's got a load of crap. He needs to find out. And of course, this again is where your local club should be coming in. What I do as a champion, if I've kept birds over 3 years old, they must have been good for me to keep them that long. But if a novice, or it used to be a beginner, bought birds off me, he got 1 or 2 of those 3-year-old birds for nothing. And of course, they were quality birds, CC winners or whatever. But I think, they're 3 years old. I'd hate to sell it somebody and it didn't breed. If he's getting it for nothing, A, he's got a quality bird in his shed to compare his other birds with, and B, he's got the chance of it producing him a good chick. When I was a beginner, I went up to, my mentor was a chap called Jack Middleton, who passed away last year, unfortunately. Brilliant guy, very outspoken. I went with £12. I went with £8. I was on £3.50 a week, was my wage at the time. So £8 was a small fortune. He was a champion, and I went in, could I buy a pair of budgies? Well, this person had turned up from Manchester. It was a very famous partnership. Bugger them, they've not turned up. You can have this pair for £12. Oh, I've only got £8. Can I put a deposit down and come back for them when I've written? Oh no, lad, take them now and take 1 or 2 birds out of that cage there. I've no more money. No, I'm giving them you. I went home as a 16-year-old with 5 budgies that day. The pair I bought, M986 1268, M986 968, an opening grey hen and an opening grey-green cock. But one of the adult cocks I took home for nothing was an Eric Lane light green. That was an old bird. But that encouraged me as a 16-year-old. Needless to say, when I got home and told my mother that I owed this guy £4, she says, right, here's the £4. You go straight back and pay him the £4 and you owe it me. But that's how I started. And I've always, that had the impression, I went home with 5 budgies and that really encouraged me. So I've always endeavoured to do the same with beginners and novices and juniors that come here.
Okay.
And again, local club, there's plenty of local champions, and this is what we should be doing. We should be encouraging these kind of people.
Definitely. So John Ashby says nondescript cage labelling is a super idea so far as the section the bird is from is concerned. So not a question, it's just a statement from John there. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Andy Eden says the reduced judging time would help judges stay around and explain these things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, that's it for our questions. If you want to carry on, Phil.
Carry on. Yeah. Oh, so we've now picked up back to where we were, haven't we? So we can perhaps now go right back up, Ricky, to where we were before we jump back. All right?
Yeah, okay.
Right. Local clubs. Should subscriptions represent a more realistic fee? I went on the internet, and again, societies are still charging around £6 per annum, right? And they're getting 12 to 25 members in the club. So that generates between £72 and £150. So for that money, you're getting 12 meeting nights, 2 nest feathers, a young stock show and a members show, 40 pence per meeting. So it's been around that figure for decades. There's been no increase. Now, I don't know, it's the next slide. I went on the internet and £6 in 1975 is equivalent to 70 odd pounds now. Right, so even on pure inflation, we should be looking at £70 sub for a local show. People then cough, I can't afford that, yet they'll go out and pay £200 for a budget. When you look at other hobbies, how much does it cost for a set of golf clubs, never mind the green fees? Well, how much does a carbon roach pole cost? 2,000 plus, and no income back from that. So even at £72 for a local club, which of course could then do a lot more of what Kevin Eatwell was talking about on the net the other night, you can achieve a lot more with that kind of income. Right, so then, sorry, where's this? The sub nowhere near meets the running costs. When you think of room hire, telephone calls, postage, printing, speakers, judges, etc. So the consequence of this is we have to have raffles, we have to have fundraising, and we have to go around with the begging bowl. Because of the limit on income, we have few and only local speakers and judges, because they're cheap, because they're the era. It gives a small outlook for the club and views because it's blinkered with that restriction. Members get bored of the same old, I'll not repeat what I want to put there, and can't be bothered to attend. And usually it falls down to 1 or 2 members donating more or trying to coax purchase of raffle tickets for vintage wine. It didn't start out that way. It's just been won and donated that many times that it's 20 odd years old and turned to vinegar. That's just a little joke, just to see if they're listening. So here I quote a true story that happened to me. It's been a great hobby to me, and I've always done my best to attend and pass on the knowledge that I was very fortunate to be given from Smith and Wainwright, Jack Middleton, Arthur Dexter, Eddie Geary, Ray Brown, all these people. I owe them a lot. So I've always done my best to attend and give talks at local clubs. I attended this particular club in Lancashire, and at that time I was working full time. So what used to happen, it was a dash from Chesterfield, 30 miles home, to get a packed tea and a can of pop and set off to get to wherever on time. I got to this particular club on time, 7:15. I'd eaten my tea and drunk on the way as I was driving. And there was an argument going on that the club had made £18 profit last year. So this guy said the subs shouldn't be £6, they should be £5.80 to use the £18 up. And also he didn't want the entry fees going up from 40 pence to 50 pence for the open show, even though the club was losing money on the show. These arguments went on to 9:25. I'm sat there and I decided that if they'd not wound up by 9:30, I was just going to get up and walk out. Then one of the members came up to me, very embarrassed. He says, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Reaney. The guy there that's causing all these arguments," he says, "we have to break his arm at the first nest feather to get his £6 membership. And quite often he'll sneak out if he's not won anything, and we have to catch him again." He says he doesn't buy any raffle tickets and he doesn't donate any raffle prizes. He says, "I buy £5 worth of raffle tickets at every meeting. I pay me sub and I donate 3 or 4 raffle prizes for the club nights and also for the open show." He says, "So one way or another, it cost me £90 to be a member of this society. It cost that guy £6 to be a member of the same, and he's ruined our night." So I just want people to perhaps digest that and think about it, that, you know, subs should be at Sheffield. What we did is we accepted the open show would make a loss. What happened is I put, when the society was on its uppers, there were only 6 members and no money. And I was asked to, come in and try and, I wasn't a member at the time then. So I came back, I put a flip chart up and I said, "Oh, would you like to come and give a talk?" Jeff Capes, so I put Jeff Capes down and so on and so on, all sorts of ideas. "Would you like Lutoff to come? Would you like Jack Coyton to come?" And so on. You see, so we wrote all these down. So then I said, "Right, how much do you think it'd cost Jeff Capes to come to Sheffield?" "Oh, it's got to be £15. I said, "There and back's £30. So that's what we did with all of them. And one way or another, it worked out that if we did all these in 1 year, the sub would need to be £300 per member. So I said, well, we can do some of these this year and some another year, but you can see where the money goes. And as opposed to having raffles, let's have a realistic sub of £15 and no raffles. So on the meeting night, there isn't somebody coming around when you're in an important discussion about your best opal in N, tapping you on the shoulder when you buy some raffle tickets. Whose raffle prize is it tonight? Oh, you forgot it. Oh, you'll have to owe it, so on and so on. Is that it's all sorted at the start of the year. All the income for the club is at the start of the year. They know what they've got to spend, and things can be booked and done in front. And it also means every member has paid the same and has an equal voice.
Okay, so
Okay?
yeah, so Rob Cartridge, he says he agrees with you. The membership fee issue, £5 a month is one less pint a month.
Yeah.
John Ashby has said the BS Progression Group has proposed a tiered membership of different prices for exhibitors and pet breeders, plus a membership level for garden breeders who just want to buy rings but not actively exhibit. Do you like that idea?
Yeah, I think it can be. I mean, obviously, if it's an increased membership for the exhibitors, that is where some of the income will come for some of these ideas that we've suggested to improve our open shows. The money's got to come from the membership somewhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the ones that get more out of it pay that bit more. And, at least we're attracting some garden breeders who may eventually be interested enough to come into the exhibition side. So yeah, it's a way of getting people the first step on the ladder. So certainly an idea that could be considered.
Okay, brilliant.
So on the next slide, Ricky, this is where I put £5 in 1970 is equivalent to £72.75, the same spending power in 2017. This is a fact from the internet, so it can be checked up. That would still work out at £4.54 per meeting, which is less than 2 pints. Well, it's 1 pint of beer now. Beer's gone up, hasn't it? But that's what we're looking at in realistic terms. The biggest drain on society funds is usually the open show for a one-day event. whereas reducing that cost means more funds available for trips, speakers from further afield, better prizes for members shows into club. This idea earlier on, clubs close to one another, holding one event and sharing the cost, but still keeping their individuality. Most patronage packages cost far more than the affiliation patronage fee, so have to be subsidised somehow and or reduced to not being worth applying for, e.g. quality of rosettes and awards. Your idea, Ricky, is much better than the rosettes, I feel. The argument being all the way up the affiliation fees. If they were increased, better things can be achieved, and also every member contributes the same instead of a handful of members, like in the example I quoted, propping the hobby up. Oops, what have I done there? Come back. That's it, I think, Ricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's it. So if anybody's got any more questions, I hope it's been interesting to everybody, and you've perhaps been watching football at the same time, I don't know, but I hope it's been food for thought for everybody, and thanks, Ricky, for giving me the opportunity to give it the airing that I wanted it to have in the first place.
Yeah, you're more than very welcome. See, I do think that sort of this sort of format is very helpful, and it just brings so much more available to sort of clubs around the country. You know, I mean, you were saying about at Sheffield asking sort of what speakers they'd like to have come down. And I know it's our club in a similar sort of format to this. We had a talk with Richard and Michael Miller. So I mean, Essex up to Cumbria, it's a long way, you know, just to come down for a couple of hours. But sort of doing it in this format, they're sitting in the comfort of their own home. It's fantastic. And we had a talk with Daniel Lutoff last year as well. Same sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ideas out there, and it's quite refreshing to listen to you, Phil, and I'm sure uh, others would agree with me. I mean, there's comments coming in now. It's very interesting. Bloody super to listen to. Thank you. Enjoyed it, Phil. You've got some good ideas, onwards and upwards, etc., etc. It's been very well received.
Thank you.
Obviously, we've spoke about this previously, and just so everyone is aware, this is the first time that Phil's presented his PowerPoint presentation online. This is the first time I've done this as well. So thanks for bearing with us, guys. I hope it come across okay in the format that it did. Yeah, and unless anyone else has got anything to add or ask, then I think we're done. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We did mention about putting the showcase thing up, or do you want to do that a separate night, Ricky?
If we go, if we bring that
If
up,
there's more questions tonight, we perhaps deal with them, but it's up to you anyway. Whatever.
Well, we've been going for 2 hours, so we'll give everyone a chance to have a break, etc. And so what we will do, everyone that's watching and listening, as you probably aware, at the last lot of 3 years ago, Phil put Resolution 21 forward, which was for the European style show cage, and he wants to put that forward again at the next year. And so we've got Phil's original proposal, and we can get that up. And all you guys that are not sure can question him about it, and just go right through it. And Phil will answer all your questions in regards to the showcase, the European showcase, etc. And yeah, I think if we do that another time, Phil, and
okay,
yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah, smashing. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Onwards and upwards in the hobby. That's great.
Thanks, Phil.